Hello and welcome to Life with Francy podcast, a place
Yeah.
where you will find all kinds of conversations like mental health, self-care, self-love, trauma, hobbies, and more. With this podcast, I want to create a place, a community where we support one another in personal and business life. Sorry. To get to the next level. Hope you enjoy this episode. Now, let's get the show started. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Frank. And Frank is going to teach us. He is specializes in exploring the benefits, safety, and payment strategy regarding ketamine treatment in addressing mental, physical, and addiction related illness. As a disclaimer, we're not going to say we're curing anything, but I am very interested in anything that anybody uses for mental health, for depression and anxiety. So if you're interested, it's another tool that you can go and research. So let's welcome Frank. So tell us, Frank, what is life with you?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I really enjoy your show. Life with me, well, life with me started off on a better, has been better since ketamine. And I guess that's generally what I'm here to tell people about, that I'm hoping it will give people some hope that have dealt with depression, say for a long time. I was a depression sufferer for what's like 25 years, and ketamine stopped my 25 years of suicidal thoughts in their tracks.
Wow. Yeah. As a person that suffers from depression, that is super interesting because I'm still in it.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't say like I'm totally cured. It's just that I used to live in just the pit of constantly, just having those thoughts, having those urgings. My grandmother committed suicide, so I know how that can work on you. And since I found ketamine, that part stopped, and that's given me room to grow and feel better.
Wow. Okay. So can you tell us more about it?
Sure, sure. Ketamine it's actually was invented in, I'd say, the 60s. It's actually used worldwide as an anesthetic. So sometimes you'll hear people say, it's a animal tranquilizer or something like that. Ketamine's used. It's actually on the World Health Organization's top 10 essential medicines list. So if that gives you
Okay.
some idea on how popular its use is here in the U.S. and all around the world. And a lot of the things that make it suitable as an anesthetic are actually carry over to now that we're using it for depression and other things. So it's been kind of incidental that people started noticing that when you gave people ketamine, particularly if you just gave them small amounts, like you didn't put them under, they weren't asleep, they weren't out of it, even small amounts served as like a powerful antidepressant. And that really started to get people's attention. So you would be, say, in the 60s and 70s, say you're on battlegrounds like such as Vietnam, they would be using ketamine there, and they found that it helped stabilize people's mood. It not only would it take the pain and give them, allow them to be able to operate on them, but it would also kind of like lessen the trauma and the memories of the trauma, and also boost their mood. So uh, it wasn't too long before people started thinking, wow, maybe, there's something else to this. And then people started to study it more in earnest.
Okay. Wow. And so how did you get involved in or learn about it?
Sure. Yeah. I have to thank my sister, Marcy, mi hermana. She's always on the lookout for me because I've been a sufferer for so long. And one day, she sent me an email with an article and said, hey, this ketamine stuff, this is really getting some attention. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And I said, well, Morris, I said, I only know from what I've heard from other people, it's a club drug, or, people just use it recreationally, or all these, myths and such and misconceptions. And she said, no, I would look into it. That's not really the full story. And so it took me only a year of hesitation and looking around and reading and talking to doctors before I reached a local physician. His name's Dr. Henry Mackler, and very caring guy. I knew that he cared about the work he was doing. He had actually got put onto ketamine as something to help his daughter, who was facing some very serious depression. So after I started gathering the facts, and I have a bit of a medical background, I read the studies, I heard what the doctor had to say about, 2/3 of people, even with treatment-resistant depression, people that haven't been able to get any results, 2/3 of people finding, a result, a positive outcome. And eventually I realized, hey, safety-wise, it seemed like it was pretty safe. It's being, it's used on millions of people a day. And I didn't have much to lose, but I had a whole lot to gain. So I eventually took the plunge after my sister nagged me about it a little bit more.
Wow, yeah, no, I get it. That it took you forever. It's like me, every time that somebody says something, I
Sure.
have to do the research and everything. So I'm glad that you did your research and went through it. So how did it help you?
Well, so basically what they do most of the times, when the first time you go for ketamine, they'll do, say, 5 or 6 sessions within, say, 2 or 3 weeks. So you kind of have this like loading up period. After that, people may take boosters or go back once a month or something. I personally go back once a month. I found that's a good booster for me. But you start out initially with these 5 or 6 treatments, and that's the kind of get you prepared. It kind of gives you some sense of if it's really going to help you or not. And I have to tell you, Franklin, like the first treatment I had already felt like myself kind of move above the emotional envelope I was always stuck at. I was always stuck down here. And as that stuff kind of started to pump through my veins, and I felt like it was very relaxing, it was very pleasant, like nothing strange was going on. I was just lying back in a chair, listening to some music. And I just started to feel a joy and a relief that I really hadn't like in many years. And by the end of even that first treatment, I started to really notice that all those suicidal ideations, all of that feeling like I was, on the edge of death in a sense, that started to subside. So it was startling, as you can imagine. I mean, I've been on, 30 medications probably in the course of my life. So to go and sit in this chair and get mellowed out and all of a sudden feel better, it was incredible. So I stuck with it.
Wow, yeah. So do you use like therapy with it too, or how how is the process?
Sure. Yeah. There are a lot of people do it on their own. A lot of people do it with, just continuing like their therapeutic sessions. Like I have a therapist that I see, that I have appointments with, but there is also what we call ketamine assisted, psychotherapy or ketamine assisted therapy, where people are quite literally either on ketamine during the therapy session or, immediately afterwards. So there's some evidence showing that combining therapy with ketamine is actually gets you even better results. So as for me, I still have them separate right now. I'd love to try having it, during a session. What I do now is I try to take in, like an intention or a problem that I'm, facing. And what I find is that in that, in that relaxation and in that relief, things become more clear. It's easier to kind of get over certain hurdles. Say for instance, you may have be in a contentious relationship with somebody, right? That could be family, could be friends, etc. I found that, when you go into one of these sessions, and as the ketamine takes hold of you, suddenly I'm able to kind of see some alternative ways of looking at, maybe the problem, or find a way to kind of feel some of the softer feelings, maybe come to some forgiveness even. And so I have some sense of what therapy is like in there, but there are people that are doing it like on the spot. And I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay. And then any side effects?
Side effects actually are very mild and they go away very quickly. So when you're under the influence of it, first of all, you only feel the drug in your system, say for a couple hours or so after the treatment. So your body metabolizes it really quickly. And so if you feel spaced out, you're going to feel somewhat intoxicated. They give you some things in case you feel kind of dizzy or nauseated. So that I found takes that part away. But anything that you're experiencing during that time that feels, kind of strange, or that you're drugged or intoxicated, or lightheaded or something like that, it actually goes very quickly. So the general side effects people experience are mild, and I'd actually even have to say some of them are very pleasant. So it's it doesn't mean quite the same thing all the time when you say side effects. But like more seriously, in terms of the dangers of ketamine, I mean, these are, like I said, this is used as an anesthetic. And when we use it, say for depression or PTSD, other things, we use it even at a much lower threshold than that. So it's already, I mean, in my opinion, is very safe. And then you go to these very low doses for the types of treatments that I'm telling you about. And then it comes into being really safe. What's the worst case scenario? Technically speaking, I guess if you're on an extremely high dose, you could have, like some breathing trouble or something like that. But when you go to a ketamine clinic, they have the equipment and the staff on hand. They can intervene at any time if you're in that problem. But honestly, like from the physicians I've spoken with, I mean, they've done thousands and thousands of treatments without that ever happening. So overall, I've felt for myself very safe in taking part.
Okay. And that brings me to like, is it legal in like the United States?
Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like, I don't know.
That's an excellent question. Actually, yes. So it's been it's legal with prescription and has
Okay.
been since the 60s, once it came on the market. Technically now, so say in the US, anybody that can, licensed physician that can write prescriptions for anything, technically can prescribe ketamine to you. So it's actually, even though there are usually clinics with people that specialize with this, or people like, say, anesthesiologists who've been working with this stuff for decades, a lot of clinics actually were started by those folks because that's just really been something they've been using for another purpose, but they're very familiar with. But in terms of legality now, it's not legal for recreational use. You can't, nobody's, it's not going to be legal to drive around with anytime, or you're not allowed to, drive away from the clinic, say, once you've had a treatment. So
Okay.
it's so it's a sedative drug. And you have to use it, within the boundaries of, supervision. But legality, that's not an issue. The prescriber will prescribe it to you. Like I said, that could be a PCP, could be a psychiatrist, could be an internist. anybody that has that permission. And increasingly, which is really good news, is that insurance has started to cover it more and more. So that's made it now much more available to people.
Yeah, which brings me to the next question. Like the conversation is flowing so great.
Yeah,
Where
very
can
easy. Yeah.
people go if they were interested in that kind of treatment?
Sure. Yeah, actually, you can go to my website. It's called findketamine.com. We have a directory on there of all the clinics right now that are out there. There are probably 400 or so in the US alone, and they're now spreading to Canada, to Europe, to Spain, even Australia. I was on a podcast with Katie Turner the other day in Australia, and they are just now even starting to get word. But yeah, you can do a search on my site. You can find the clinics that are out there. Most of the time people go to, they just look for a place that's convenient, to them, like geographically. But also I would stress that it should be a place that you're being treated by people whom you're comfortable with, right? I mean, when you're distressed already, you're depressed or anxious, it's more than fair to want to be treated with kid gloves and to want to be treated by somebody who has, your best interests at heart and you feel comfortable with them. That's certainly, I think, one of the things that allows you to really relax and get like the therapeutic effects.
Thank you so much. Is there anything that I forgot to ask that you would like to tell my listeners about it?
Sure, sure. So one of the things that's been exciting is that since, it started out really becoming a breakthrough for depression, but what also has kind of happened alongside that over the last number of years is now, folks have been using it for OCD, PTSD, people have been using it for bipolar. I myself am bipolar. And so I found
Me
that,
too.
are you okay? Yeah. All right. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Yeah. So that's been very helpful for the depression side of my bipolar, right? Um, so so the mental health piece has been expanding. Another whole section of growth and breakthrough has been for pain conditions. So I'm sure people that have migraines, people that have neuropathy, people that have chronic regional pain syndrome. There's a lot of types of pain and severe pain that's hard to treat, especially if you want to avoid opiates, right? We know how dangerous that can be to go down the opiate route. Now ketamine is giving people some options that aren't, it can be given, it doesn't seem to have the same impact in terms of causing like addictive behavior. And in fact, it's often surprises people because when they think of ketamine or they think of, a club drug or something that people party with, something that's like feels good to use, they naturally wonder, like, doesn't that lead to addiction? How can that be safe? Well, actually, the clinics now are also using it to help break addictions. So there's been research going back actually to the 80s in Russia, where a doctor was using it to help break people out of alcoholism and heroin abuse. So it's kind of surprising right now. We're even seeing that as a positive, perhaps, in the war on, getting people out of substance and behavioral addictions. So with those three categories now, with the mental health, the pain situation, and the addiction health, we're just seeing an explosion. Studies used to be few. Now there are tons of studies going on. And one thing I would share with the audience is, one way to get involved in ketamine treatment, if you're having trouble even with insurance or something, is many places have trials going on. So, there could be, state hospitals or hospitals in your area that are running trials. And I know many people that have gotten involved with their early treatments in trials. And so they got it, actually some of them were even paid for it. Not only didn't they have to pay for it, but they were actually paid to have the treatment, and then and got all of that relief. So I just want to say to people, I know it can be hard to hold on to hope, with some of these conditions, like especially, if you're, people that have dealt with it for a long time. Like I said, myself, 25 years. I certainly never thought that one day, I mean, I had, virtually given up hope on, being, suicidal, thought free. I mean, nothing was helping, and I just want people to know now that there is something else out there. Is it for everybody? Nobody's saying it's for everyone, but I've, in my book, you can certainly read about, the tips, how to have good treatments, how to find safe clinics, what the experience is like, and then a bit about, what it feels like to feel better, which is something you may not have even experienced in a long time.
Yeah, and I thought I saw the book on your website. Tell us more. So you just talk about ketamine?
Sure. So actually, the book's called IV Ketamine Infusions for Depression: Why I Tried It, What It's Like, and If It Worked. And for instance, the questions, basically I tried to answer were, okay, why would someone like me try it? Okay, here I am, a bipolar depressed patient for, decades. But I have like a medical background, so I can read clinical studies and such. So between, I was able to actually do the research, and I really needed the help. And so I was able to look into it. So I kind of break some of that down so that everybody can be brought in, like into that knowledge by reading the book. That kind of shed some light on why I even tried it, or why I thought it would be safe and helpful. And then, what it's like. A lot of people ask, okay, you get, high on ketamine. Like, what's that like? What's the ketamine trip like? Is it frightening? Do you feel out of control? Is it scary? And I talk about some of the experiences I've had. Most of them, I have to say, have been very pleasant. But I do talk about an experience that's called, people call it a K-hole, a ketamine hole. And that's kind of an unofficial term for like a bad trip, like, maybe someone took too much, or, and they end up in this, you might feel anxious, you may feel frightened, you may feel, because you're kind of discombobulated and you're, under the influence of this drug. I have had experiences like that. I can tell you that they have not had any, negative lasting effect on me. Some of them, I think, have actually even been helpful, because sometimes it forced me to confront some things that I was really emotionally bothered by. So I've had those experiences, but I tell people about that because I know people, it's not like taking a regular antidepressant. So it's a very good question. What do I experience when I go and I lay down in this room and they give me an IV? What happens over that 45-minute treatment? And I go and explain a bit of that. And of course, the $1,000,000 question, if it worked, what's all come out of this? And like I said, the main thing for me has been me putting those suicidal thoughts aside. I can't tell you how that's worn on me, for decades. And like I said, seeing what's happened to my grandmother and other people in my family, I've seen people suffer with that. I've dealt with it myself. And that's just, that's a real low place to be in and to try to function, right? So, so it did work. It did work for me. And I've seen it work for many people. Like I said, officially, the statistic is 2/3 of people with treatment-resistant depression will get a positive response. And from talking to people and people that write me from reading my book, I found that a lot of people actually, I mean, because of course it's not me doing it, but they thank me. Hey, that's really saved my life. It really turned my life around. I hadn't heard of it, had no idea. Then I was just concerned about what it was and whether it was safe, whether it was legal. I read your book. I, got a lot of insight. And then I, had the courage to go in and meet a doctor who ushered me through it. And wow, like this has turned my life around. This has turned my child's life around. So it's been I feel very fortunate to have, stumbled upon it. And at findketamine.com, I tell people everything I can that could be of help to them too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I will
Uh,
have all the links for your books and website
Great,
on the description of the episode.
great. Hey, I'm here to serve your community however I can. If anyone has any questions, they can even email me at frank@findketamine.com. I don't give that to everybody. I'm going to give that to your audience, though. I try to answer as many personal questions as I can. But everyone, please have hope. Stick with your host here, who is digging up all the great resources and coaches and inspiring you to continue to move forward in life. Thanks so much, Rancelyn, and I'm here for whatever you need.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I found you through Podmatch. That's how I find most of my guests, a great
Yeah,
community for
yeah,
podcasters and podcast guests to share the expertise. So, once again, thank you so much for your time and sharing it with us. I really had a great time.
me
For
too.
those that saw the video, I was dying in the background. So I had to put myself on mute a lot. So I'm glad that I was able to do the interview.
You did great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. Thanks again. I did join your Facebook group also. So
Okay.
if people, have questions or anything, I'll try to answer on there as well. So I support you. I'm a fan, and I look forward to seeing all the things you're doing coming up.
Oh, thank you. That means so much to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. All his information, website, books, and everything else that he has to offer will be in the description of the episode. I hope you have hope you have a blessed day.
Thanks.